Exodus chapter 20 and verse 18 and 19 reads like this. Now when the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off, and said to Moses, You speak to us, and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die. They were afraid, and naturally so. They were afraid of the thunder and the lightning and the storm-like atmosphere at the top of the mountain. They were afraid of what to them seemed like the dangerous voice of God. And Moses speaks and says, hey, don't be afraid. Verse number 20, Moses said to the people, Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. God's come to test the reins. God's come to check and see that we're on track. God has come to just investigate, to keep us on the right track. Verse number 21, the people stood afar off, while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. They didn't want to hear the voice of God, because it's easier to ignore a man's voice than it is the voice of God. If we can convince ourselves that the voice speaking is the voice of a man, whether it's our own voice speaking in our hearts, or whether it's just the voice of some other human, and that it didn't really come from God, then we can more easily write that voice off. Now, it's important that we use discernment. We can't we can't listen to the voice of every goober that's talking to us from the internet, as I talk to you on an internet platform. Right? We've got to filter some things out. But we can't simply write off everything we don't like or that challenges us and say, I'm going to cast that aside. The voice of God is dangerous because there are implications to ignoring the voice of God that are uncomfortable. And that's why sometimes we will only go so far. We'll only go so far in a service where God's Spirit is moving. We'll only go so far in prayer when God is really connecting with us. And then we'll just clam up. And it's because we're feeling and hearing the voice of God speaking, and we don't want to get any closer to the mountain. That's what the nation of Israel did in this scriptural setting. God had a plan for them to be the people of God, to be the ones who were near him, his messengers. And they were on board with being God's people. They wanted the promises and the benefits, but without the strings attached, without really having to be close to this God that spoke in this thunderous way from the top of the mountain. And for the Old Testament nation of Israel, this was a national tragedy for them. They wouldn't really get close to the mountain. They wanted to be just close enough that they were the people of God. They wanted to be in the shadow of the mountain, but not too close. And with few exceptions, they never did go closer. Certainly there was the man Moses that we read about this morning. There was Joshua, his successor. We read about a man by the name of Samuel who had a special sensitivity to the voice of God. There was David, the sweet psalmist of Israel, Elijah and Elisha. But yet, there are far more examples of individuals like Saul, who was more interested in how he looked to the people than in being real. There was Solomon, who mixed worship of Jehovah with false gods. There was Gehazi, who followed Naaman to receive his reward and wound up receiving his leprosy. They carried this wound nationally and said, I want to be the people of God, but not too much the people of God. The New Testament author of Hebrews goes back to this point, and he draws from their experience, and he warns us, the New Testament church, to not let something similar happen to us. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 18 and 19. He says, For you have not come to what may be touched, a blazing fire, and darkness, and gloom, and a tempest, and the sound of a trumpet, and the voice whose words made the hearers beg that no further messages be spoken to them. He looks back to the to the nation of Israel, he says, they came to a physical mountain that could be touched, but not us. Our mountain is different. We come to a spiritual mountain. Verse number 22, but you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, to the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels in festal gathering, and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, and to Jesus the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. While a mountain with thunder and lightning at the top is certainly a big deal, Paul, or the author of Hebrews, says that the New Testament church has greater things than these. And if they were in big trouble for ignoring the lesser visitation of God in the Old Testament, and they were, the implication is we don't want to be in the position of ignoring the voice of God when we have these greater things. Verse 25, see that you do not refuse him who is speaking. For if they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less will we escape if we reject him who warns from heaven? Verse 29, for our God is a consuming fire. Fire takes all it can get. Fire will push moisture out of wood. I've put wet logs on a fire before, chunks of firewood that weren't completely seasoned. And the fire will drive that moisture out of that wood. You can watch the end grain of that wood and watch it sizzle and bubble and watch that moisture be pushed out, because when fire gets a hold of something, it doesn't want to stop until it has it all. And it'll work to drive out whatever stands in its way until that piece of wood or whatever can be completely consumed. The author of Hebrews says this is a picture of God. He wants all of us. He wants to be God of every part of our lives. And that's what discipleship is. That's how we grow. God speaks. God's consuming fire begins to work in our life. It begins to push out those things that are incompatible with his work in our lives. And through his process, our lives become consumed by him. God speaks, I obey. God prompts, and I respond. These are all good things. This is how it's supposed to work. But when we choose to stand afar off, when we choose to govern or throttle or limit the voice of God in our lives, the Bible says that's a very dangerous thing. And that's when the voice of God becomes the dangerous voice of God. It's dangerous to know he's speaking and not respond. This has been the Journal of a Country Pastor. Thanks for joining us. Hit that like and subscribe. Leave a comment. It helps out a lot. Share it on another social media platform. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Bye for now.